Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on T&K on Channel 11. I'm Tessa.
And I'm Kristen. It's a beautiful day outside, and we have something special in store for you. We're counting down the top 10 lesser-known events in American history.
So let's begin. At number 1, Roger Williams was a strong advocate towards the separation of the church and state during the 17th century in America. His views on religion and government quickly entangled him in disputes with the Massachusetts authorities in Salem and Boston. Roger Williams upset the elders by denouncing the Massachusetts Bay Charter. This charter allowed confiscation of the Native American lands without compensation and the punishment of purely religious transgressions by the civil officials. Roger Williams' sensibilities went against these practices. One of his beliefs that caused particular grief among the charter was he argued that an individual Christian would know when he was saved but could not know about the salvation of others. Therefore, it was senseless to require religious qualification for voting. Thus, Roger Williams was calling for the complete separation of the church and state, a position that undercut the authority of the church and civil leaders. The impact that Roger Williams had on America was great. By him calling for the separation of the church and state, he was setting the way for the future of America. At number 2, during the early 1800s, Robert Livingston, one of the creators of the Clermont, received a monopoly of steam navigation on the rivers of New York for 20 years, provided that he produced a steam-powered vessel within 12 months and that traveled 4 miles per hour. In 1802, Robert Livingston met a man named Robert Fulton who would help him create the steamboat. The agreement was to construct a steamboat and to ply a route between New York and Albany. Fulton built a model and tested different means of propulsion, giving the preference to a wheel on each side of the model. This model ended up being too frail for the Ballard engine. In 1803, they tried a second steamboat, but it moved too slow. In 1805, Fulton got a new engine from Boulton and Watt. The following year, construction began, and then in 1807, the first voyage took place, and it was successful. The Clermont's impact on American history proved to be great, and ended up changing and advancing the way of transportation.
At number 3, we have on June 16, 1861, Thaddeus S.C. Lowe ascended 500 feet above the Columbian Armory with a telegraph key, an operator along with a wire following a tether line to the White House, and his own handmade balloon. This was the first recorded dispatch ever telegraphed from an aerial station, which would later benefit the Balloon Corps immensely, as they aided the armed forces with aerial observations and maps. This technology was later used to work with the general of the army, whom he rode with and made observations over the Battle of Bull Run.
At number 4, towards the end of the Civil War, the Confederacy knew that they were on the path of losing the war. Knowing this, they decided to change tactics. They decided to launch a so-called terrorist attack on New York City. The Confederacy plan was for a group called the Fire Brigade to set off a series of fires in hotels across the city. The fires were supposed to be used as a diversion and a signal to other groups to take over by force the police and free the prisoners in Fort Lafayette. If this plot to burn New York City would have been successful, the impact it would have had on America would have been that New York would have most likely fallen into the hands of the Confederates, and the outcome of the Civil War could have possibly changed.
And at number 5, we have the recession of 1920 to 1921. During this period, the United States reached its highest point of deflation with a reported 18%. Economists say that it was caused by an extremely sharp deflationary period after World War I, which was caused by returning troops, which created a surge in the civilian labor force, a decline in labor union strife, changes in fiscal and monetary policy, and changes in price expectations. Changing from wartime to peacetime was a huge shock for the U.S. economy, and factories that were focused on war to shut down or retool their production. It gave Americans a push into the roaring 20s, however, the Great Depression followed soon after. And we will be right back after these short messages. Do you have trouble making friends? Are you a loser who nobody wants to talk to? Well, join the club. Call the Teen Friend Hotline at 1-800-854-4521 to talk to other outcasts about your pathetic lives today. Call now. First minute is free, then it's $85 an hour.
And we're back. Okay. At number 6, in September 1926, Henry Ford announced to his company a 5-day work week. Henry Ford decided on the 5-day work week because he thought it would bring great prosperity like the 8-hour day did. He also figured that this would encourage industrial workers to vacation and shop on Saturday. Before long, manufacturers all across the world followed his lead. This became known as the 40-hour revolution. The impact the 40-hour revolution had on America was that it changed the way the workforce operated. And at number 7, on October 6, 1927, the first talking picture came to be in America. It was called The Jazz Singer. This movie was not a complete talkie movie, but it broke free from the silent screen traditions only for brief dialogue and songs. The impact The Jazz Singer had on America was huge. It changed all studios and movie theaters to sound, therefore ending the silent film art.
At number 8, we have on April 15th, 1939, artists Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster graced the cover of Action Comics #1 today with a red-caped figure who can lift a 2-ton car as if it were a picnic table, in which they called him Superman. With deep economic depression and war in Europe looming over the nation, it represented a symbol of hope and escape for Americans. It spun off into 6 different TV series and several generations of movies and gave Americans the idea that anything was possible. Number 9, we have the infamous December 7th, 1941. Imperial Japanese Air Service pilot Shigenori Nishikashi crash landed his Zero on the Hawaiian island of Niihau after participating in the attack against Pearl Harbor. The natives on the island did not know about Pearl Harbor when he first landed on the island, but when they became aware of the situation, they captured him and held him hostage. The man then sought and received help from 3 locals of Japanese descent in overcoming his captors, finding weapons and taking several hostages. He was killed by the wife of Ben Kanali, who was injured during the process, and one of Nikashi's Confederates, Yoshiro Haredi, committed suicide. This incident sparked the nationwide belief that every Japanese, even those who were American citizens, might aid Japan, and caused them to relocate them to intern camps all over the country throughout World War II. And finally, at number 10, on June 28, 1969, 8 cops stomped into the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan, a well-known dive that served alcoholic beverages to multiple members of the gay community. Within just a couple hours, the entire village was rioting against the police. The officers raided the dive with information that the owners did not have a license to sell liquor, but unfortunately the situation escalated quickly. The riot ensued when a 17-year-old cross-dresser was led out of the bar and was reportedly shoved by a cop as she was entering the police vehicle, and she retaliated in igniting an outreach amongst the gay community. The riot was controlled in a few hours. However, it was the spark that started the gay rights movement of the 1970s and the gay rights advocates that still exist today. So that's all we have for you. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.